Put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
Since RoboCop was effectively a man in a suit, ED-209 could not be in any way a man in a suit. So that's one of the reasons we chose to offset the hips or do things that would be clearly impossible for a person to fit in that. That's why his hips are so far apart. It's one of the reasons that there's rails. The joints don't have a standard, knee joint. They've actually got a linear rail kind of a system that's, again, one step further away from a person in a suit.
I felt that they knew so much more about it, and they came with the proposals. Then when they came with proposals, I could easily say, okay, but then do this, If we do it this way, then let's make this strange thing they had built, which is a gray area. Let's make that the eyes, the whole eyes. These are the eyes. There's hundreds of eyes. Basically, whatever it is, they can see through that, not by a little camera on the top of his head,
For the inspiration for ED-209, we drew upon kind of a number of different areas, tried to try something in the natural world. So killer whales were something that had a pretty menacing kind of a countenance. Everything's kind of an excuse. There's a big air intake, and it looks a lot like a mouth. And there's this big dome that you can't really see where the eyes are. The idea there was that this would be maybe like an anti-laser surface. This is kind of the maquette stage, and it really is pretty instrumental. The last round of design until you blow this thing up to full scale. This is like basically, it's blue foam, it's house insulation foam. You take that, it's cheap and stuff. And can mix with my favorite toothpicks and soda straws. You kind of build a little version of the robot that you can talk about. The leg, upper leg would be here. It could pivot, and then also, in order to take a step, the guy could actually shoot his leg forward, and then kind of, as he's walking forward, do this. So that was pretty critical. You could see through it. There were lots of moving parts. There was a big screw that would be responsible for moving the leg up and down. And then like on the back here, a little bit of a plate, the screw access. And we figured since we're going to have a screw that's in there turning, we might as well put a detail on there. So I modeled the end of the screw to look like one of the axles you see on a railroad car. So as the guy's actually moving, you see these little things spinning.
The full-scale ED-209 was a design that Craig had come up with, working with Paul Verhoeven and myself, and trying to get something that Paul was happy with as a character, a nemesis for RoboCop.
The crew that we were building at this time, Pete Ronzani, Neil Breitbart, and Paula Lucchesi, my girlfriend at the time, we pretty much built that thing together. And it was hell, but it was one of those experiences you come through, and at the end of the day, it's something we always remember. Later on, we became married, and so I guess it didn't really split us apart. All the forms were built up out of wood. We used a lot of plywood, masonite, and just fur, and actually kind of built up patterns and stuff bit by bit. We used a lot of plastic forming techniques and fiberglass techniques. And seeing how it was basically the middle of summer in San Rafael, we were pretty much in hell, up to our ears in fiberglass, and wearing these suits, because you have to wear these protective suits and respirators and everything else while it's just blistering hot. It's a pretty tough portion there. One of the keys with movie props is they've got to be pretty flexible. You have to be able to put this thing together and take it apart in relatively short order. And actually, that's one of the things I'm pretty proud about, was the model was held together with bungee cords, snaps, and different techniques. So basically, two people could take the thing apart. We were pretty much left alone. In fact, for the full-scale prop, I don't think Paul saw it at all until it was delivered, in Dallas. That was pretty cool. I felt pretty trusted. Phil Tippett would check in on us on a periodic basis, come over and see what we're doing, and just kind of roll his eyes at the mess we were making and stuff. Our hearts were in it so much that compensation even wasn't necessarily important. Just contributing to this whole kind of process was really the motivation. The full-scale prop was essentially just that, a prop. It was capable of being posed. The head could be swiveled, from side to side. The arms were able to be pivoted. We could rotate them down or rotate them up. But it was really the kind of thing that had very, very limited motion. Because of the size of the big guy, his head was so big that even though we made this pretty reinforced fiberglass mold, it still sagged a little bit. So when you see the big one compared to the miniature version is built exactly off the pattern for the big one. But when we molded the big one, it squished just a little bit. So the big guy's head's just a little bit fatter than the miniature version. And actually, it's one of those things that always bugged me when I saw it in the film, because I recognized they were a little different. But what are you going to do?
Phil Tippett is the man on RoboCop who actually animated the stop-motion puppets for ED-209.
This is the stop-motion miniature of the ED-209 puppet that has an articulated stop-motion skeleton or armature in it. And this is actually, part of it's actually visible here. And you can see this lead screw mechanism that was part of the design that Craig Hayes had come up with.
Then they've made a number of miniature puppets that were articulated and had little skeletons inside of them of metal so you could pose them, and then this was done through stop motion animation.
Every little aspect of this particular character has got an armatured, jointed part that allows. And shooting one frame of film can, depending upon the complexity of the shot, take anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour and a half. Adjusting everything properly for one frame of film.
You get your camera, you take one frame, stop the camera, you go onto the little stage, move the arm infinitesimal inch, go back behind the camera, shoot another frame, one frame at a time.
Most of the work for Ed-209 was stop motion animation, with the exception of the staircase scene, and in particular when he falls down the staircase. The staircase that Ed-209 fell down was a 4-foot square miniature built of plywood and brass and the usual kind of model building materials, reinforced so that when the guy fell down the stairs it didn't shake the set too much. Phil did all of the kind of masterminding of exactly how we were going to do that, what angle the set would be at to get the best roll and everything. And then we rigged up the puppet with the pin in his foot, and when we said go, camera was rolling at speed, we'd pull the pin and the robot would tumble down the stairs and off the edge of the set. I was the one catching the robot because I was the one who had to fix it up for the next take, so I wanted to make sure as little stuff broke, So I'd be down there trying to make sure the little thing didn't hit the ground and break off an important part, and then I'd have more work to do.
I came up with this technique that Craig Hayes helped me with, where I thought, I don't want everything to go through like a secondary optical pass. I want everything to be on the original negative, if that was possible.
For Ed-209's machine guns, we rigged up photographic flashes.
And then while I was animating the Ed-209, you animate one frame at a time, one frame at a time, one frame at a time, getting ready to cock his guns or whatever.
I took some Minolta flashes apart and rigged up a system where we could put the actual flash tube into the tip of the barrel of Ed-209's gun.
And backwind the camera one frame and turn all the lights off on the set.
And then we would take cotton, take some colored plastic gel, wrap some orange around the thing, and then take some cotton and sculpt what would look like a muzzle flash.
And they'd go off. Boom.
So that you get this thing that looked like a burned in kind of a muzzle flash.
I put like tons of diffusion on the camera too, for those particular frames, not the rest of the stuff, but just for the frames where the flashes were going off. So it didn't look like cotton, it looked like more of a diffused flash. And then I just like randomly put different shapes in the cotton so it had the characteristic effect of gunfire.
It was a pretty interesting technique, but because of the high voltages, involved in the sort of somewhat, movie-ish quality of the wiring, occasionally they'd get a few thousand-volt shock.
And I'd be like working away on the thing, and he never insulated these things well enough. I'd be like right in the middle of doing this thing, and he'd hear the scream, ah! And I was just gonna get like these, like 10,000 volts going through me. It was really wild.
I'd been through enough shocks myself that I kind of found it amusing, but I don't think they appreciated that at all.
Everything's very clear when you get electrocuted.
And this is a shot where we actually made a little miniature RoboCop. So this was a stop-motion RoboCop that grabs the gun, and Ed-209 is firing as he gets his arm pointed over to his own arm and actually blows his arm off. This was kind of an interesting shot to achieve because of the way the robot, it's one of the things, the limitations of the robot. He actually technically couldn't shoot his own arm because his head was in the way. So we ended up sort of cheating, and you don't see it in the movie, but we unhooked the arm and just kind of pulled it out to the point where he could do it. And it's all a big phony thing. So this shot of him launching his missiles, he had this giant blown off arm, which was a practical part that built out in San Francisco, and had to fly it out to Dallas. And I remember as Phil and I were going out there, I had this big giant blown off robot arm wrapped in some paper and stuff, and they asked me what it was at the airport. And I didn't want to say it was a big giant blown off robot arm, so I said it was a planter, and they said, okay, just put it in there. It's hard to imagine these days, getting a giant blown off arm, through any kind of airport security, but back then it was like whatever.